Welcome to the History and Heritage Podcast with me, Liam Blake. Join me as we uncover hidden stories and insights that shaped our world. From mysteries to legacies, join us on this journey through time. If the bee disappeared off the face of the earth, man would only have 4 years left to live. It's a line that gets repeated a lot, often attributed to Albert Einstein, though there's no proof he ever said it. Whether he did or not, the point still stands. Without bees, human life as we know it would collapse. And here in Ireland, there's one bee that's been part of our story for thousands of years, shaping farming, law, folklore, and everyday life. The native Irish honeybee, Apis mellifera mellifera, often called the dark European honeybee. Today on the History and Heritage Podcast, we're talking about Ireland's own honeybee, where it came from, what role it played in Irish history, how it very nearly vanished, and the fight to keep it alive today. Let's roll the clock back. Similar to my episode on the goats, picture Ireland 5,000 years ago. The last ice age has ended. The first Neolithic farmers are starting to clear the land, plant cereals, and domesticate animals. And along with cattle, sheep, and pigs came bees. Or perhaps more accurately, the bees came on their own, following flowers across Europe into Britain and Ireland as the ice retreated. Over millennia, these bees adapted to this island's tough Atlantic climate, cool, damp, and unpredictable. They became smaller and darker than their southern cousins, with thick body hairs to shed rain and keep warm, and a knack for conserving energy when the weather turned grim. By the early medieval period, people weren't just noticing bees, they were organising laws around them. Ireland's Brehon laws, the native legal code that predates Norman influence, included an entire section called the Bec Breha, or bee judgments. These set out who owned a swarm, how honey could be shared, and even how much you could claim in damages if someone's bees stung you. If you lost an eye to a bee sting, the fine was bigger than for a sting to the hand. There were even rules about a swarm moving into someone else's tree. You couldn't just claim them, you had to split the honey. Think about what that tells us. By 1,000 years ago, beekeeping wasn't just a hobby here, it was a serious business. Honey was the main sweetener long before sugar arrived. Beeswax lit churches and cottages, sealed manuscripts, and was traded far beyond Ireland. Monks used it in ink and pigments for the great manuscripts, the Book of Kells among them. In short, bees weren't just insects. They were woven into the legal, religious, and economic life of early Ireland. For centuries after that, every tua, which is the way that Irish civilization was broken up at that time, every small farm and every village kept bees. These man-made hives were straw skeps, which were domed baskets plastered with mud or cow dung to keep out the rain. A good beekeeper could tell the mood of a hive just by standing nearby and listening. A low hum meant all was well. A rising restless buzz meant a swarm was about to take off. Honey went into food and drink, a drink called mead everywhere in early Irish myth, while wax made candles that burned cleanly before the altar or in the home. Even then, bees carried a touch of folklore and superstition. There was an old custom called telling the bees. If someone in the family died, you draped black cloth over the hive and whispered the news to the bees. It was bad luck if you forgot. Some said the bees would sicken or leave entirely. They were part of the household's life, not just livestock. Right up to the 18th and 19th centuries, the Irish honeybee was everywhere. Observers at the time described a hardy dark bee that kept working through drizzle and cold when other bees stayed in the hive. It wasn't as big a honey producer as some foreign breeds, but it was dependable. Thrifty, as beekeepers say, making the most of whatever forage was available. Wildflowers, hawthorn hedges, clover, fruit trees, or even bogland blooms. Then came trouble. From the late 19th century onwards, beekeepers began importing other subspecies, Italian bees and Carniolan bees particularly, bred in warmer climates and chosen for their higher yields and gentle temperaments. But these imports didn't thrive in Ireland's wet, unpredictable weather. Worse, they hybridized with the native bee, diluting the very traits that had made the Irish honeybee such a survivor. On top of that came disease. In the early 20th century, the acarian mite swept across hives, killing colonies by the thousands. Later came varroa, an even deadlier parasite. The Irish honeybee had no natural resistance. As beekeepers tried to replace lost hives, more foreign stock came in. The pure native line was pushed further and further to the margins. By the mid-20th century, people began to notice that the dark native bee, the one that had been part of our story for thousands of years, was disappearing, and fast. In some areas, it was already gone, replaced by hybrids or imports that needed more feeding, more management, and more chemicals to keep it alive. A living part of Ireland's natural and cultural heritage was slipping away almost without comment. But, as you will have gotten used to with so many stories of the heritage breeds of Ireland, a few people refused to give up. Beekeepers started comparing surviving colonies to old descriptions and museum specimens. They noticed isolated pockets of dark bees, especially in remote valleys, on islands, or in wild places untouched by imports. These bees weren't just lookalikes. DNA studies later confirmed they were the real thing, direct descendants of Ireland's original Apis mellifera. This rediscovery sparked a movement. The Native Irish Honeybee Society, NIHBS, was formed to protect what was left. Conservation areas were set up where imported bees were banned, preventing further crossbreeding. Breeding programs focused on the traits that made this bee so valuable: ability to fly in cooler weather, thriftiness during long wet spells, strong disease tolerance, and a temperament that suits traditional low-intervention beekeeping. Science has since backed up what old Irish beekeepers always knew. This bee belongs here. It's perfectly adapted to Ireland's Atlantic conditions. It survives the kind of spring that turns from sunshine to sleet in an afternoon. It keeps working when other bees have stayed home, and it does this while supporting the wider ecosystem. Hedgerows, fruit trees, wild plants, and crops all benefit from its pollination. Protecting the Irish honeybee today isn't just about honey production. It's about keeping a unique genetic resource alive, one that evolved right here alongside our landscapes and farming traditions. It's about biodiversity, ensuring wild plants and food crops keep thriving. And it's about heritage, holding on to a relationship between people and pollinators that stretches back to the first farmers, is written in our ancient laws, and still hums in our folklore. But the threats, unfortunately, are not gone. Varroa mite is still a major challenge. Pesticides and loss of wildflowers mean less food for the bees. Climate change brings more extremes. Heavy rains, sudden cold snaps, long droughts, all of which test even this hardy native. And, despite conservation efforts, foreign imports still come in, risking hybridization and loss of native genetics. Yet, there's hope. Ireland is now seen as a stronghold for Apis mellifera, one of the last in Europe. Beekeepers and scientists here are working together to protect and expand its numbers. Public awareness is growing too. More people know that if you see a small dark honeybee buzzing on a hawthorn hedge, you're looking at a survivor with a history stretching back thousands of years. So, next time you pass a hedgerow, alive with buzzing, or see a hive tucked behind a stone wall in a country lane, think of this. That bee's ancestors might have flown over this island before the first round towers rose, before St. Patrick ever arrived, and even before the Brehon laws were first recited. It's a little creature with a huge story, one that ties together ecology, farming, law, and tradition. We nearly lost it once. With care and attention, and maybe a bit of luck, we won't lose it again. I'm Liam Blake, and this is the History and Heritage Podcast. You can listen to this and all episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and follow me on Instagram at Liam Blake Podcaster for photos, extra stories, and glimpses behind the scenes as I keep digging into Ireland's living heritage. Thanks for listening, and next time you hear that low hum in the wind, remember, it's the sound of a very old partnership still alive, still working, and still almost uniquely Irish.